Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I remember the first time I pulled onto that gravel lane just past midnight. The radio crackled in my lap, breathing static between every word, and I felt the heat of the truck's engine fade into the night air as soon as I killed the lights. I'm Deputy Michael Grant, Cascade County Sheriff's Office, and that night was the start of more sleepless hours than I care to count. The call came in at 0014. A local farmer reported a broken-down pickup at the edge of his property. Engine running, headlights off, driver nowhere in sight. He'd seen taillights brake sharply, then disappear into the shadows. When I rolled up, the cab's red glow had all but vanished. I put the patrol lights on low so they wouldn't swamp my night vision and stepped out onto stones that cried under my boots. No wind, just a hush so thick I thought I could taste it. The barrel of my flashlight cut a beam through the darkness, its circle drifting over tall grass and fence posts. My heart told me to move slow, so I did. The truck sat 20 feet ahead, hood warm, exhaust ticking in the cold. I stopped at the cracked driver's window and tapped once. Slow, deliberate. No answer. I lifted my light into the cab. The mirror dangled by a single wire, swinging. The seat was damp, fresh. I caught my breath and ducked to look under the steering wheel. Water pooled in the rubber floor mat. I nudged the door handle and it swung inward too easily, as if unlocked by an unseen hand. Inside, the radio in the console hissed to life for a heartbeat, then slipped back to silence. I froze, hand on the holster, listening to my own pulse. The key still sat in the ignition. I could have grabbed it, checked the engine, called for backup, but something held me back. Instead, I eased out, slammed the door, and spent the next 10 minutes circling that truck. No prints in the dust, no footprints in the grass, just the still beating heart of a missing driver. By the time backup arrived, I tucked the keys into evidence and left the cab alone. Sometimes you don't need answers, just distance. I drove off without another word, headlights cutting my own path back to town, mind still jumping at every rustle. That was the first night. The nights that followed brought worse. A week later, I got a call about a silent alarm in the old Barker farmhouse out on Mill Creek Road. The owner's panic in her voice was enough to hurry me there. She'd moved back in 2 years before, after her father passed, and had set up sensors inside and out. That night, the motion lights flared twice around the back barn. She tried calling me from her cell, but after 2 rings, the line went dead. I knew better than to assume a dropped signal. More likely the battery or the criminal removed it. When I pulled in, the porch light was unlit. I cut the engine and walked toward the front door, gravel snapping softly. The lockbox was torn from the doorframe, broken wires dangling. Inside, the hallway was dark except for the red glow of the keypad's dead screen. No step on the welcome mat, no welcome at all. I moved room to room. Dust motes floated in the flashlight's beam, stirred by my passing. I found a window cracked open in the living room, screen torn at the corner. Outside, under the porch, I saw fresh footprints in the dew, boot treads from someone wearing size 10 or 12, maybe a contractor. I followed them toward the broken barn door. In the low light, the barn looked deeper than it should, its rafters swallowing the beam. The floor was littered with overturned feed bags and spilled grain that smelled sour under the lamp I set on the threshold. Then I heard it. A soft clink, like metal on metal. I swept the light to the back wall where the old water trough stood empty. A wrench lay at its base, its handle dented. My radio sputtered in my pocket, white noise filling the dark. I wanted to call it in, but the radio died. I flipped it open and the batteries were gone, pulled out clean by whoever came before me. I stood there for a long minute, feeling watched. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anything, just that wrench taunting me on the ground. I left with the wrench bagged and tagged, promise of a forensic check. Later, technicians told me the prints on the handle were too smeared to read. The farmhouse stayed dark for months afterward, and the owner moved back in only after installing new cameras. The next week, I learned cameras can fail, just as phones and radios do. Then came the night at Pine Hollow. I'd been chasing a runaway teenager who took off on his dirt bike down a side trail. By the time I caught his wheel tracks, the entire woods felt alive with silence. My spotlight caught broken bottles, discarded jackets. I followed the trail to a clearing I'd never seen on maps, an abandoned kiln from the 50s. The bricks were cracked, stones piled against one another. In the middle, an old concrete slab with markings I couldn't place. It looked like someone had scraped symbols into the surface, shallow grooves that caught the flashlight beam. My radio burst to life just then, screaming for my location. I thought I had backup coming, only it was dispatch, telling me another officer was down near the quarry entrance. I left the symbols and ran. My boots sank into mud where a bucket lay toppled. A wrench, old and rusted, sat next to it. Same size as the one from Barker Farm. My gut twisted. By the time I found the other deputy, he was unconscious. A bump on his head, truck door ajar. He woke in the ambulance, eyes wild with fear, mumbling about the slab and voices. I promised him calm. Then, alongside him, I heard it too. A low, humming vibration under my feet, like the earth remembering something buried. The paramedics sealed the quarry gate, said the place was off limits until morning. I almost begged to go back in, but rules are rules. Those nights blurred into one another. Coffee turned cold next to my radio in the station kitchen, and I counted shifts by the number of empty cups. I stopped trusting lights. Street lamps felt like traps. Headlights could lure you off the road. Every shadow became suspect. I checked my reflection in the mirror before heading out, looking for a hardened mask I could wear, forcing calm. But it never came. The Silver Tahoe responded to call after call. Each time, another missing person, another odd sign. An open gate where a lock had been, an abandoned cell phone showing a single photo of a dark hallway, static-filled. I learned to watch for details. How the porch light swung when no one was home. How the gravel shifted under boots just before a light went out. How my own pulse echoed in my ears. I don't know how many nights I spent staring into empty rooms, convinced I'd see someone standing just beyond the beam. Sometimes I did, fleeting shadows that melted away when I flicked the flashlight. Other times I heard whispering on the radio when no one was speaking. All I had were signs and questions. Gradually, I realized the darkness wasn't just outside. It had followed me home. I'd wake at 3 a.m., my partner's breathing steady beside me, and I'd lie there, listening for a crunch of gravel I knew wasn't coming. More nights went by than days. I stopped answering texts from friends. No words could explain the fear that settled in my chest. I never meant to become the guy who checks on every rattling shutter or double-checks deadbolts at 2 a.m., but after what I've seen, there's no going back. That night, after the Pine Hollow incident, I was running on fumes, coffee so strong it tasted like fuel. My partner, Deputy Torres, kept trying to lighten the mood, cracking jokes about haunted cows or alien hitchhikers, but I couldn't laugh. My mind replayed that low hum under the quarry's soil, like something ancient stirring just beneath concrete. 2 nights later, I answered a call from the pump station on Highway 42. Maintenance workers reported the security gate had opened on its own. Cameras caught a silhouette wandering through the yard, then died. When I turned onto the station road, the big overhead lamps were off, leaving the pump houses stacked in black like tombstones. My headlights picked out the gate latch hanging open at a 45-degree angle, its chain dragging on the gravel. I killed the engine so it wouldn't spook whatever was out here, grabbed the flashlight and left the truck door ajar in case I needed a quick escape. The gravel crunched underfoot, the sound too loud, echoing against empty metal buildings. In the beam's periphery, I saw a row of propane tanks, their labels glowing silver. One tank had a fresh dent, as though someone had tried to pry it open. A faint, constant drip sounded somewhere in the darkness. Water or oil, I couldn't tell. I followed the noise toward the back of the southernmost house. The maintenance shed door was unlatched, swung inward with a creak that did more than I ever wanted in a horror movie. Inside, shelves of tools and parts cast long shadows. A toolbox lay open on the floor, its contents spilled. Wrenches, wire cutters, gloves, some smeared with rust-colored streaks I couldn't identify. I froze when my radio burst with static, loud enough to make me jump. Then, a clear voice, "Miguel, are you there?" My heart kicked. That wasn't Torres. It was a voice I didn't recognize. It barked, "I told you to stay where I could see you." The static swallowed the rest. I spun, flashlight beam slicing through shadow to reveal nothing but empty space. My pulse thundered as I called back, "Cascade County, this is Grant. Who's this?" Silence answered me. I swept the beam again, the open shed, propane tanks, gravel reflecting the light. No footprints, no other footprints, only mine. I backed out, slammed the shed door, and ran across the gravel toward my Tahoe. As my boots kicked up stones, the drip stopped. Then the chain rattled at the gate behind me. Ow. Jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, locked it. The engine roared to life. My hands shook so badly I could hardly keep the Tahoe straight. I drove off and flicked on the dome light, empty, but taped under it was a small scrap of paper. One word scrawled in shaky black ink. "Listen." I shoved the note in my pocket, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Nothing followed. I reported the incident as a possible break-in, but the gate and shed locks were all intact, hinges unbroken. Security footage from the station ended abruptly. 5 seconds of clear video, then a blackout. Cameras offline for exactly 2 minutes before rebooting. The technician said it was the same firmware glitch that affected other county cameras, but I couldn't shake the feeling someone had walked right up to the lens and told it to stop watching. After that, I avoided the station, but the calls kept coming. Another midnight, rain slick on the pavement, brought me to Hemlock Hollow Road. The caller said his 2002 sedan was found parked in the middle of the lane, engine and lights off, doors locked. He'd circled back from a bout of road rage and found it empty. By the time I got there, the rain had stopped, but the asphalt still glowed under my headlights. The sedan sat facing me, bumper dented as if it had reverse rammed a guardrail. I parked behind at a safe distance. Raindrops clung to the windshield, and I rolled down the window just enough to hear the hush of the night. I stepped onto the road, gravel at the shoulders crunching under each footstep. The sedan's doors were all locked, the windows too tinted to see inside. Even the trunk was sealed tight. I crouched, looked beneath. No sign of the driver, no footprints leading away. My radio hiccuped. I called dispatch. You copy? Hemlock Hollow plate says. Static swallowed my words. I tapped the radio microphone. Then the lights flickered inside the sedan. Interior lamp pulsing twice, then nothing. It was a message, clear as day, as if someone inside switched it on. I felt the hairs on my neck stand, heard my own breathing grow shallow. On impulse, I pulled my flashlight and circled the car. The beam caught something taped to the passenger window, a Polaroid. I eased it off and shone the light on it. It showed the inside of a dark corridor, cinder block walls, a flickering fluorescent light overhead. No one in frame. But on the wall I recognized the symbol scratched in the concrete at that abandoned kiln. Only here it was drawn in chalk, smeared as though someone tried to wipe it away. I dropped the photo back on the window, crouched, still trembling, and heard a voice beside me. "You're getting close." I whirled, flashlight too slow. The beam caught empty road, tree line. The voice was gone. I leapt back to my Tahoe, jumped inside, locked the doors. My radio spat static, then cleared. "Grant, you okay?" Torres barked. I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said, "Shut off the lights." Get here silent. I didn't trust my headlights after what had almost happened to me, and I wanted to see if whatever was messing with me would come again. Torres arrived, slower than usual. His headlights stayed off until almost on me, then he cut the engine and joined me at my door. I showed him the Polaroid. His face went pale. "That's the northeast tunnel in the old quarry," he said. "We sealed that place after the bodies." The quarry, where the surveyor found the first 3 men entombed in concrete slabs. It should have been off limits, buried under steel gates and warning signs. Somehow, someone got in, took a Polaroid of an interior nobody can reach without heavy machinery. We left that road at full throttle, sirens off, lights off. I phoned the county coroner, asked him to alert the state police, then drove home in silence, mind running through every unsolved case, every missing person. The walls of my house felt too close. The darkness outside bled into my living room. I sat in the hall light and waited for dawn. Every noise amplified, HVAC kicking on, creak of floorboards, hum of the fridge. By morning, I was done. I filed an off-duty report. Every word, every photo taped to the report. I requested state troopers for patrols at night, extra cameras, motion sensors, whatever they could provide. Because I was facing something I couldn't handle alone. That afternoon, I got a package at the station. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single, unmarked key taped to a folded note. West Gate, County Quarry. Midnight, nothing else. The key fit nothing we have on file. It felt heavier than any key should, as if it carried weight beyond metal. The station supervisors thought it was a prank. I disagreed. Tonight I'll drive out there. I'll bring backup. I'll scan every inch of that crater until the sun comes up. But my stomach knots at the thought. Because after everything, after the trucks, alarms, and empty houses, I'm still listening for whispers on the radio, shadows moving just inside the beam. I eased the cruiser down the narrow access road toward the old county quarry, headlights off, emergency lights suppressed. A full moon glinted off the rocky walls, outlining the pit's sheer drops and jagged ledges like the teeth of some dormant beast. My partner, Torres, rode shotgun, his flashlight in hand and eyes flicking between the darkness ahead and the rearview mirror. I tapped the brake once, then let the truck roll forward to keep the engine noise to a soft rumble. I didn't want to flush whatever lay ahead. At the gate, the key they'd sent fit. The tumbler turned with a metallic click that echoed against the stone face. The chain clanked as I pulled it free and let it drop into the gravel. As the gate swung open, the beam of my flashlight swept across tire tracks, cutting through loose scree, fresh within the last 24 hours. I knelt to inspect them. Deep impressions from heavy tread, 4x4 style, with occasional sharp scrapes where the wheel must have slid on quartz outcroppings. Whoever drove in here hadn't tried to hide it. They'd wanted me to know they'd been here. My radio crackled softly. "Grant, you copy," Torres whispered. I flicked the mic button and answered, "Copy, Torres. Move in on foot. Keep to the left wall, 5 meters apart. Watch for tripwires." He nodded, though I couldn't see it in the night. We left the Tahoe idling, lights off, and stepped onto the broken asphalt, boots crunching gravel and shale. The quarry floor lay barren, gray, and littered with rusted barrels and concrete chunks. A low wind stirred dust motes into the flashlight beams, turning them into dancing specters. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, that familiar knot of fear mixed with resolve. Fear because I knew something was here. Resolve because I'd sworn to face it head on. Torres' beam passed over an overturned barrel. Rust had eaten through one side, revealing tools inside. A hacksaw, rope frayed at the ends, yellowed cloth strips. Anything but normal maintenance gear. I signaled with a tap on my shoulder and pointed. He nodded, clicked a photo with his body camera. Then we pressed on toward the tunnel entrance, 30 meters up the eastern wall. The tunnel mouth yawned like a wound in the rock, its concrete arch stained with algae and soot. I shone my light inside, darkness so complete it swallowed the beam beyond 10 feet. Along the right side, I noticed scrawled chalk symbols, the same jagged markings from the truck Polaroid, only here they formed a spiral pattern around the arch. The chalk dust lay fresh on the ground, pressed into scuffed boot prints. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and signaled Torres to stay back. I clicked off the flashlight and let my night vision adjust. Starlight spilling into the mouth of the tunnel gave just enough gloom to see rough-hewn stone walls and a shallow, muddy trench running down the center, as though someone had dug a makeshift drainage channel. I switched on my IR scope, mounted on my rifle, and scanned the interior. A pair of faint heat signatures flickered 50 meters inside. 2 bodies huddled against the far wall, just beyond the reach of my regular light. "Torres," I whispered, voice low, as the echo of water dripping somewhere deep within. Heat signatures about 50 meters in, against the wall. 2 figures, could be alive. I cocked my head, listening for movement, breathing, any sign of life. I heard nothing but the steady drip and the distant echo of concrete crumbling somewhere beyond. He clicked his own flashlight on low beam, casting a narrow cone of light. We moved together, rifles raised, hearts thudding. Each step dislodged pebbles that skittered down the trench. My hands trembled against the rifle's cold metal, fingers brushing the safety switch. I reminded myself to breathe, counted to 3, then stepped forward. The first body was slumped against the damp wall, head bowed, arms bound behind with stained rope. I swept the beam up. The face was gaunt, eyes closed, pulse faint but present. The second crouched beside, head lifted slightly, lips moving in a silent whisper. I signaled to Torres, "Cover the left flank." He angled his light onto the second figure. A man, mid-30s, shirt torn, eyes wide with terror as he met my gaze. "It's okay, help's here," I murmured, even though I wasn't sure help could fix what was happening. I knelt beside them, heart hammering. The first man stirred, groaned. I reached into my pocket for flex cuffs. Torres hit the radio. "Dispatch, this is Grant. At the old quarry, tunnel entrance. We have 2 persons detained. Medical requested immediately. Possible restraints and trauma. Procedure code Delta. The radio crackled, but no answer came. Just that familiar hiss. I hit transmit again. Still nothing. We weren't alone down here. Above us, something shifted, stones scraping. I looked up at the tunnel roof. A crack opening, a small rock falling into the trench with a splash. Then another and another, unrhythmic, nearly silent. Something was moving in the ceiling. I stood, flashlight sweeping upward, rifle raised. The second man cried out, "There up there, he's coming back." A heavy thunk echoed behind me. The tunnel entrance blocked. I spun. Torres yanked at the rope wrapped around the arch, but the concrete slabs had fallen in massive chunks, sealing us inside. I hit the radio frantically. "Torres, get to the front! Get that door open!" He ran back toward the mouth, beam dancing wildly. I stayed with the captives, 2 lives slipping away, and I held their only hope. My radio sparked to life, voice distorted. "Grant, I see you." It wasn't Torres. The voice was low, gravelly, almost amused. "Don't worry. We'll free you." The lights flickered, 1, 2, 3 times. I saw shadow move against the wall behind the kneeling man, though nothing was there moments before. The chalk symbols glowed faintly under some unseen light source. The second man began convulsing, eyes rolling back. I dropped to one knee, pressing a hand to his chest, feeling how thin his ribcage was, how weak the beat. Medical would have at least 10 minutes getting rescue gear here. In 10 minutes, people die. I turned back to the tunnel mouth, shouting, "Torres! Torres!" My partner's light returned, but he was holding the slab, sweat tracing lines through the dust on his forehead. He tried to shift it, but it wouldn't budge. Stones tumbled from above, cracking the rifle barrel in my hand. I raised my voice. "Use the pry bar, west side." He passed me the bar, and I wedged it under the heaviest slab, bracing against the wall. My breath caught as the weight shifted a half-inch. Then a voice echoed through the tunnel, close now. "Stop, or they stay." The first man opened his eyes, looked at me, lips stained dark. "You have to leave," he rasped. "He'll kill us first." His head lolled to the side. I shook him. "Stay with me. EMTs are coming." I stopped, because the voice I heard wasn't in my radio, it was behind me. Torres shone his light into the darkness of the inner tunnel, beam tilting upward. I heard a breath, long, deliberate, waiting. I aimed the flashlight at the wall where the breathing came from, nothing but rock. Then the light swept downward, catching a figure peeling slick black gloves off his hands. He stepped into view, tall, gaunt, face hidden by shadows, eyes reflecting the beam like coals. He smiled, thin lips curling. No words. I felt my rifle buckle in my hands, my legs folding. Torres cursed, raised his light, voice shaking. "Drop it! Sheriff's office!" The man stepped forward, scratching a symbol into the dusty floor with a shard of chalk. Sparks flew as the chalk hit stone. He never looked at us, eyes fixed on the triangle spiral he drew. He paused, stepped back, and in a voice that sounded like metal dragging on steel, whispered, "We belong to the darkness." Then he melted back into the deeper tunnel, leaving only the echo of his words and the spiral behind him, chalk fresh and stark. The slab groaned under our combined weight, shifting a few inches. I braced, heart pounding in my throat, the hands of my captives limp against my sides. The first man lay still, eyes closed. The second writhed against his bonds, moaning. Radio silence. The moonlight outside the tunnel entrance had dimmed behind a passing cloud, and somewhere beneath the stones I felt that same low hum, like the earth remembering those buried, stirring as though it could not rest. I looked at Torres. He looked at me. We had 2 men barely conscious, a blocking wall of rock, and an adversary we couldn't see. The whisper seemed to curl through the tunnel, pressing in on us, urging us to surrender. I steadied myself. "We get them out," I said. My voice sounded rough in the cramped space. "Then we get help. We don't leave anyone behind." He nodded. I tested the pressure on the slab again. But behind me, dripping somewhere in the darkness, came the soft, steady sound of chalk dragging against stone, writing out a promise I couldn't read. I stepped back into the tunnel's mouth and swallowed against the stench of wet stone and chalk dust. Torres hauled on the pry bar until the concrete slab shifted enough for me to wedge my shoulder against it, inch by inch easing the opening. The two men lay at my feet, semi-conscious, their labored breathing mixing with the distant drip of water. I glanced over my shoulder at the deeper darkness, where the figure had vanished. Even without the flashlight, I could still see the spiral symbol scorched into the rock, like an accusation. "Hang on," I whispered, voice barely more than a rumble. My chest felt tight, lungs raw. I braced my foot on the edge of the slab and shoved forward, metal bar trembling under the strain. Sweat dripped from my brow, carried by the chill air. Behind me, the captives moaned. One slurred, "It's hungry. Don't let it take us." I ran a hand over his cheek. His skin was clammy, eyes glassy. The other lay still, lips moving in prayers or curses. I couldn't tell. Torres finally tore the slab free with a crack that echoed through the tunnel. Loose chunks clattered into the trench. I hopped over the gap, checked the bindings, rope fraying, soaked through with a sticky residue. I drew my knife and severed the cords. The second man pushed himself upright, nearly toppling over. I caught his arm, helped him stand. His legs trembled. He swayed, then steadied. I glanced up at Torres, who was shining his light deeper into the tunnel, searching for any sign of the figure. "Let's get out of here," I said, voice urgent. We half supported the two captives as we retreated toward the entrance. But as we neared the fresh gap in the wall, the tunnel seemed to inhale around us, closing in. The dripping sound had multiplied. Drips from unseen cracks, plinks resonating off stone. My radio lay forgotten on the ground. Every time I tried to grab it, my fingers brushed damp chalk streaks. Once we were back under the arch, I realized the spiral symbol had been altered. Another loop added, now 3 circles instead of 2. I froze. Torres jolted the stray man, and his head flopped back. "Grant!" Torres hissed, voice shaking. "Look." I shone my light at the chalk. The final circle had been drawn while we were inside. No one could have reached it. The loops glowed faintly, as though etched into the stone, not chalk. I knelt and touched the line. It felt warm, vibrating softly beneath my fingers. The air around us crackled with static. The first survivor muttered, "It doesn't want us to leave." His eyes rolled back. He slumped against the wall. I half carried him the rest of the way. As we crossed the threshold, I felt the wind change. Cooler. Heavier. The moonlight that shone across the crushed gravel now looked dim, tinted gray. Outside, the Tahoe's engine still idled. Torres guided the other survivor inside while I dragged the limp body to the passenger seat. I slammed the door, locked it, and collapsed against the steering wheel. My radio crackled to life. "Dispatch, we're exiting the quarry. 2 injured. Need medics ASAP." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. No static, no whispers. I exhaled, closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, the digital clock in the dashboard read 11:62. My eyes flicked to the windshield, and through the glass I saw footsteps in the glare. Fresh boot prints leading away from the tunnel entrance, moving toward nowhere. I pointed to the window. "They're still here." But the prints stopped at the edge of visibility, vanished into the darkness beyond my headlights. I backed the Tahoe out of the ravine, careful not to flood the floorboards with gravel. Behind me, the gate clanged shut, as if by its own weight. The slab had shifted back into place. The spiral symbol outside the arch had disappeared, erased by the falling gate. I killed the engine at the top of the access road, heart pounding so loud I thought it might echo down the canyon. The medics met us at the station entrance. They rushed the survivors inside, lights and sirens betraying urgency. I stayed in the driver's seat for another minute, running my hands over the muddy wheel. My uniform smelled of dirt and blood. I flicked on the dome light and saw 2 chalk smudges on my collar. I went inside to file the report. The bunker hallway was silent. My footsteps rang on the concrete floor, and for a second I thought I heard faint scratching behind the walls. I shook my head, blamed it on nerves, typed out the facts. 2 survivors rescued from Old Quarry Tunnel. Evidence of restraint, trauma, possible involvement of suspect known for concrete encasements. Security key found at mailbox, entry authorized. Will continue investigation at dawn. I hit save and leaned back. My reflection in the monitor looked gaunt, hollow-eyed. I ran my fingers through my hair and wished for sleep. Instead, I found the chalk scrapings on my desk. A single spiral loop, drawn in shaky strokes. No note, no sign of who left it. I stared until my vision blurred. Tonight, I'll go home. I'll strip out of this uniform, stack it neatly for tomorrow, and climb into bed next to my partner. I'll pretend that's enough to block out the quarry's echo, the clink of falling stones, the hiss of unseen voices, the hum of chalk on rock. But I know it's not. Because as I walked back to my cruiser, I glanced up at the station's security cameras, and for just a fraction of a second, each lens turned away from me, as if something behind them whispered, "You don't belong here." The hours after dawn felt unreal. Quiet, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the hospital's fluorescent corridors. I signed off the medical reports and handed the survivors over to detectives. They moved them into separate wards, promising full statements when they recovered. Torres and I walked back to the cruiser, in silence. The sun had burned away the morning mist, but I felt colder than I ever had on a winter's night. I kept my eyes on the ground, watching my boots leave prints in the dust by the front entrance. Every step felt heavier, as though I carried something unseen in my pocket. I reached in and found the unmarked key from the package, still cold to the touch. I slipped it into my coat and locked the cruiser, faking a call over the radio as I walked away. Torres waited by the door, worry in his eyes. "Want to grab coffee?" he asked, voice wary. I nodded and headed across the parking lot, each footstep echoing against empty windows. Inside the diner, the coffee was bitter, the waitress too chipper at 6 in the morning. I stared into the steaming mug, stirred in too much sugar and forced a smile. Highlight from the station: suspects in several missing person cases, victims bound and buried in concrete, 2 survivors rescued from the tunnel. That key, coffee cold in my hand. I realized no one here knew the half of it. No one could see what I saw beneath the quarry walls, hear the whispers in the chalk spirals, feel the hum under bare feet. I stared out the window at the street lamp reflected in glass. It didn't belong there in daylight. When Torres slid off his stool, he said, "Call it a day?" I nodded again, more easily this time. We left the diner without a word. Outside, my cruiser gleamed in the sun, windshield dotted with dust flecks. I started the engine, radio silent. I backed out and headed for home. Every traffic light green, every intersection empty. Something about that ride felt too easy, like the county itself held its breath. letting me slip away before it claimed me back. At home, I dropped my coat on the chair by the door. The unmarked key and the spiral scrap of chalk lay on the seat. I picked up the chalk piece and held it against the key, thinking of how they belonged together. One metal, one powdery, both cold. I dropped them into the trash and walked to the bedroom. My partner still slept, breathing regular and unaware. I slid under the covers, heart finally slowing. For a brief moment, I closed my eyes and let myself drift. But then my phone chimed, an alert from the station's surveillance feed. I rolled over, squinting at the screen in my hand. A live thumbnail image showed the quarry gate. It should have been locked, empty, inactive at this hour. Instead, the camera flickered on, then zoomed in automatically, just once, on the asphalt in front of the closed gate. And there, in the glare of the camera's night vision IR, I saw two boot prints appear side by side. They padded toward the gate, stopping dead at the chain link. Then the prints lifted, as if their owner had stepped backward. The camera shutter clicked. The feed cut to black. My partner stirred. I dropped the phone on the nightstand and sat up. The room felt tight, walls pressing in. My eyes darted to the door, half expecting someone tall and gaunt to stand in the frame. I swallowed, ran a hand over my face, and slid back under the covers. Sleep came slowly, punctuated by the hiss of the HVAC and my own pulse. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the feeling of someone watching. My eyes flew open. The room was dark, but for the faint glow of street lamps outside. I reached for my phone. No new alerts, no missed calls, nothing. But on my dresser, shining in the dim light, was the unmarked key, and the spiral chalk loop smudged against the wall above it, fresh and stark. A single circle, delicate yet defiant. My breathing caught. I sat up slowly, mind racing through every possibility. It shouldn't be there. I threw back the covers, stood, and flipped on the bedside lamp. The key and chalk lay on the dresser exactly as I'd left them in the trash. My trash can stood empty beside the dresser. No key, no chalk scraps, no evidence of my morning routine. A breeze stirred the curtains, though every window was closed. The hush was complete. Then the single circle above the dresser pulsed faintly, as though breathing in time with my own heartbeat. I stepped closer. The chalk line felt warm under my fingertip. I glanced at my partner, still asleep. I should wake him, call someone, lock every door. But I stood frozen, staring at the spiral, feeling its center draw me in like a vortex. Behind me, from the hallway beyond the bedroom, came a scratch, soft, deliberate, the sound of metal against stone. I spun, reaching for my holster, but the hallway was empty. My pulse thundered. I turned back, only to see that the single circle had become 3, drawn in precise loops, each one dark and fresh as though sketched by gloved fingers just now. No note, no footsteps, just the chalk spiral crawling across my wall, whispering, "You belong to the darkness." And as I stood there, hand trembling over the key, I knew there was only one choice left. To follow that spiral deeper into the night, or to let it claim me wholly and disappear into the silence forever. I woke to the smell of damp concrete and stale air, though my bedroom was miles from the quarry. My eyes snapped open at 3:17 a.m., the digital clock's red numerals blinking like a heartbeat. The spiral on the wall pulsed faintly in the darkness, a swirl of chalk loops, calling me back to that tunnel. I sat up, the sheets sticking to my clammy skin, heart slamming against my ribs. Behind me, my partner mumbled in sleep. I didn't dare wake him. Instead, I slipped from the bed, bare feet meeting the cold wood floor. Each step toward the dresser felt impossibly loud in the hush. The key lay beside the spiral, its black metal surface catching the moonlight through the curtains. I stared at it, remembering the weight in my pocket, the promise of midnight at the old gate. I pinched a fragment of chalk between trembling fingers and traced the outer loop of the spiral, feeling its warmth pulse under my skin. My pulse matched it. Fast, thudding, impossible to ignore. I glanced back at the bedroom door, wide open. The hallway beyond was dark, but I could see the outline of the station-issued radio mounted on the wall, its silent face mocking me. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pocketed the chalk before slipping into my uniform, pants and shirt, boots waiting at the foot of the bed. In the kitchen, I poured coffee, black, no sugar, hands so shaky I spilled grounds onto the counter. I sipped and tasted concrete, fear, ash. By the time the sun first bled over the horizon, I'd driven out to the quarry alone, leaving a note on the kitchen table. Back in before sunrise, call if urgent. My partner's coffee mug sat empty beside it. Engine off, I stood at the gate, key in hand. I hesitated, palm sweaty around the cold metal. Morning light made the chain link shimmer, as though coated with dew, but I could still see the dented propane tanks, the broken shed, the spiral etched above the entrance, erased by night's end but now faint in chalk residue. I unlocked the gate, each click resonating like a pistol shot, and pushed it open. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped inside alone. The quarry floor was silent, save for distant crows circling the rim. The heavy barrels lay abandoned. The tunnel mouth yawned, its darkness an invitation and a threat. I switched off my flashlight and let my eyes adjust, watching the faint heat signature of the tunnel entrance on my IR scope. No figures this time. No survivors huddled against the walls, just that humming darkness. I placed the chalk spiral on the ground, then knelt to trace a fresh loop in the concrete threshold, matching the pattern on my wall. A ritual, a promise, a plea. I rose and walked into the tunnel barefoot, boots left behind beside the gate. My socks dampened in the cool mud, but I welcomed the chill. It grounded me. Each step echoed, the trench on the floor catching loose stones. I reached the first spiral above the arch, running my hand along the grooves. They felt too deep for mere chalk. I paused, fist to chest, and listened. No drip, no hum, only my breath in and out, steady, deliberate. At 50 meters, I found the spot where we'd rescued the captives. The bodies were gone, the bindings removed. In the spot where the first survivor slumped, a fresh slab of concrete covered the floor, tamped flat, symbols scraped into its surface. I knelt and read the loops, 4 circles now, the spiral's arms reaching outward like grasping fingers. My blood ran cold. I imagined the figure crouching at the wall, drawing each ring, marking time, marking me. I pressed my palm against the slab. It hummed, low, deep. My knees buckled beneath me and I sank into the trench. The radio on my belt crackled to life, static then my own voice. Grant to dispatch, need immediate backup. The transmission cut off. I looked up at the dark tunnel mouth, the morning sun a thin ribbon behind it. I reached into my pocket for the chalk spiral clasped tight between my fingers, but it was gone. Behind me, something scratched the tunnel wall, metal on stone, slow strokes, deliberate. I spun, flashlight beam whipping around the curve of the tunnel, catching nothing but deepest shadow. The scratching moved farther in, each scrape echoing in my chest. My boot caught the flap of my pant leg, my knife missing from its sheath. I patted every pocket, knife gone, chalk gone, my cell phone dead. Only my badge and radio, worthless without power. Panic welled in me. I stood, chest heaving, and took 2 steps backward. Behind the shed, the propane tanks rattled. as if a hand brushed across them. I flicked on my flashlight. Its beam landed on a symbol scrawled on the dirt path. A spiral with 5 loops, each one larger than the last. Concentric circles etched in whatever substance stained the ground dark. My heartbeat thundered. I realized the loops matched the number of people who'd vanished into this place. 3 in the quarry, 2 in the farmhouse, 2 survivors, and now me, the 6th. My radio blinked, red light pulsing. I pressed the button. "Grant here, I'm leaving." The radio replied, not with dispatch, but with the same low voice I'd heard in the tunnel. "Stay, complete the spiral." The gravel at my feet shifted, and I looked down to see fresh footprints circling the symbol on the ground. 8 prints, too small for boots, too large for a child. They traced a ring around me, moving steadily clockwise, stopping just beyond my flashlight's reach. I shone the beam on each in turn. Impossible to read thread pattern, flesh smudged onto the earth. Thunder rumbled behind me. I spun. The tunnel entrance was gone, collapsed in a neat heap of rock and concrete. No way back out. The gate clanged shut somewhere above me. My flashlight flickered. The wind carried a whisper. "Finish the spiral." My radio sparked again, voice replaced by the static hum growing louder. I looked at my hands, one clutching the spiral loops inside me, the other reaching for a pocket where nothing remained. The cold pressed in from all sides. I took a breath and knelt, pressing hand against the ground. The mud felt warmer now, alive. I closed my eyes and began to trace an outward loop in the dirt, drawing the spiral to its 6th ring. The final ring for the 6th soul claimed by this place. The radio cable snaked across my vision, the static swelling to a roar. My heart pounded in tandem with its hiss. The tunnel walls seemed to bend inward, as though watching. My fingers cut into earth, chalk and blood mingling, marking the final loop. I finished the circle and opened my eyes. The footprints had vanished. The gate above creaked open, a sliver of daylight beckoning. My flashlight flickered, then stabilized. The wind stilled. The radio went silent. I stood and walked forward, toward the light, toward salvation, or so I hoped. My boots found solid ground as I emerged from the rubble and stared out at the empty quarry rim. The key was in my hand once more, its metal cold but familiar. Behind me, faint in the wind, a voice whispered just one word: "Stay." I locked the spiral loops in my mind as I climbed toward the road, knowing that once you complete the spiral, the darkness never truly lets you go. I slid into the cruiser and cut the engine's hum. Midnight air pressed against the windows like a living thing. Dispatch had flagged Forest Road 42, an old logging route swallowed by pines and moonless sky. My name's Deputy Cole Bennett, and I'd been on night patrol long enough to learn that stillness can scream louder than any siren. Headlights painted the narrow gravel ribbon ahead in stark white. Loose stones rattled under my tires. The radio crackled once, then settled into static. I keyed the microphone. "Dispatch, Bennett en route to 42. Over." No answer. I guessed the tower was ditching night chatter to stretch its circuits. At the turnoff, trees arched overhead like cathedral pillars. My spotlight cut swaths of clarity through inky branches. 20 feet in, a tan pickup lay askew, half buried in low brush. Its engine cold. No hazard lights. The driver's door swung open at a crooked angle. I killed the headlights, switching to low beam. Moonlight pooled through gaps in the canopy. My boots crunched the gravel as I approached. The heater fan clicked off. A faint breeze stirred pine needles across the cab. I leaned through the open door and dipped my flashlight inside. The dash clock glowed 1:03 a.m. A leather journal lay open on the passenger seat, pages flapping in the breeze. The worn cover read, Doctor. Meredith Shaw, Botany Department, Greenville College. I radioed the dispatcher with a clipped voice. Pickup belongs to Dr. Shaw, missing since yesterday. No signs of body or struggle. I gave her home number. Silence answered. I cursed under my breath and slid back in. Retrieving the journal, I flicked through handwritten notes and diagrams of rare orchids until I found a Polaroid tucked between pages. It showed a moss-covered iron door embedded in stone, half hidden by ivy, no caption. The coordinates scrawled beneath matched a spot deep in the Pisgah foothills, beyond any marked trail. I stored the journal in an evidence bag, sealing it with a zip tie. The pickup held nothing else but a half-empty thermos and a digital camera, memory card intact. I snapped a photo of the surroundings, logged the plate, and radioed for backup. Then I climbed back in. The cab smelled of damp wool and pine sap. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I waited 20 minutes for backup, time enough to imagine every wrong turn she might have taken. Gravel clicked behind me. Patrol SUV lights cut through the darkness. Deputy Ramirez eased beside me, engine idling. "What have you got?" he asked. "Pickup's cold. Shaw's journal had a Polaroid. Coordinates fall outside any public road." I handed him the photo. His brows knit. "That old cistern again?" he murmured, voice low. He'd heard the county legend. A cistern dug in, the 30s by moonlighting loggers, sealed with concrete in '85 after a collapse. Folks said it swallowed more than water. We set out on foot. My flashlight traced path markers painted on bark. Faded odds and evens denoted a ranger's loop. The trees closed overhead. Sky vanished. Only our boots and breathing broke the hush. Every snap of twig jolted my heart. In the beam's edge, trunks appeared to shift, shadows galloping ahead. After a half-mile, Ramirez stopped. He knelt to examine footprints pressed in soft clay beside the high bank. They were small, uneven, bare to mid-calf depth, spaced as if someone hurried. I crouched beside him. "No shoes," I whispered. We followed the prints downhill, away from the road, until they vanished at the lip of a stone embankment. 200 yards off trail, the forest floor sloped into darkness. We circled the bank until I saw a rusted ring set in stone. I knelt and brushed away moss. Beneath, the outline of a metal hatch yawned open. Air poured up like a deep sigh. My radio crackled, static punctuating the quiet. "Ramirez, I'm going in." He nodded, already staying by the mouth. My flashlight beam was swallowed as I dropped 6 rungs down a narrow ladder bolted to stone. The air turned musty, stagnant water and earth. My stomach rolled. At the bottom, the beam struck a low tunnel. Wooden braces sagged under damp weight. The floor was slick. I checked my pistol, chambered round, safety off, and radioed dispatch Bennett and Cistern, requesting additional units. No reply. Whoever built this hatch had cut power lines long ago. We were alone. The tunnel stretched forward, ceiling scraping my helmet. I counted my steps quietly, worn leather echoing. At roughly 50 feet, the passage widened into a chamber. My light revealed scratch marks on walls, symbols etched deep, concentric circles intersected by jagged lines. I crouched to trace one with a gloved finger. Stone felt cold, damp. My breath puffed in the beam's glow. Ramirez's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Sir, I think something's moving above me." Heard the ladder rattling. He sounded pale. "Don't let me dead air, Deputy Bennett." I froze. The silence returned, heavy as water. "Keep calm," I whispered, though my voice shook. A sharp tap sounded, metal on metal, from the tunnel's far end. We exchanged looks I couldn't see. I called, "Who's there?" No answer, just dripping water. Then another tap, rhythmic, deliberate. My flashlight flickered. Static hiss burst through the earpiece. "Come closer," a whisper breathed, impossible to place in the tunnel's emptiness. My pulse spiked. "Ramirez, get back!" He scrambled up the ladder. I backed toward the opening, eyes flicking over the symbols. One symbol gleamed darker, freshly scratched. As I passed, it looked like an eye. At the ladder, Ramirez waited, gun drawn. We climbed in silence until the hatch slammed shut behind us. No wind, no hand. Just the thud that echoed across the slope. We sprinted uphill, lungs burning, until the moonlight welcomed us back. The next day, the old forestry office denied any record of recent tunnel breaches. Forms from '85 mentioned safety collapse. Nothing of symbols. The cage ladder had been removed, they said, but I still carried the Polaroid and my notes. I'd seen the symbols. I'd heard the voice. That night, I slept with the lights on. In my dreams, I heard rasping behind painted walls. And somewhere in the woods, the cistern waited, quiet and open, hungry for more. I woke the next morning to a headache that felt like gravel grinding in my skull. Sunlight barely filtered through the blinds, but I couldn't risk sleep. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, the steam fogging my glasses as I stared at the Polaroid taped to my desk. That iron door, half hidden by ivy, taunted me. I had to know more. By 8 a.m., I was back at the station, filing my report on the cistern incident. My Sergeant Jacobs raised an eyebrow when I handed him my notes. "Tunnel sealed decades ago," he said, flipping through my pages. No ladder, no footprints, no whispers. He closed the file and set it aside. "County legend. Best not stir old ghosts, Cole." I nodded, but the knot in my gut tightened. Jacobs didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in paperwork, protocol, and patrol routes. I believed in what I'd seen. At noon, I drove to the Greenville College campus to talk with Dr. Meredith Shaw's department head. The geodesic glass building gleamed in midday sun, sterile and modern compared to the pine-shrouded roads I'd just left. I waited in a drab lobby until I was ushered into an office cluttered with pressed flowers and student theses. Department Chair Dr. Lillian Hayes looked up, surprised by my uniform. "Deputy Bennett," she said. "I wasn't told you'd visit." I pulled out Shaw's journal. "Doctor?" "Shaw disappeared June 4th, I said. "Your files say she left on a field study, but her truck showed up here." Hayes swallowed. She admitted Meredith had been obsessive about rare orchids near Pisgah. She showed me emails where Meredith wrote of wanting to find undiscovered specimens. She was driven, Hayes said, but she loved her work. I can't imagine her vanishing without a trace. I asked about the Polaroid. Hayes studied the photo. "That's the old logging cistern," she murmured, voice catching. She was fascinated by old industrial sites, the interplay of nature reclaiming man's mistakes. She ran a hand over her mouth. Meredith was also studying invasive vines around those ruins. She thought the cistern's entrance moss patterns indicated a microhabitat for rare ferns. I left with her emails and sketches of orchid clusters. I added them to my evidence bag and headed north on Highway 276 toward the Boydsville precinct, where the last missing person report in the cistern zone had been filed. A local hunter named Jimmy Kincaid back in '90. The records were locked in a file cabinet behind glass. The clerk, a tired woman named Rosa, searched the archives and handed me a single page. Subject failed to return from overnight hunt. Vehicle found next morning. Subject missing. Presumed lost in woods. No body recovered. Anything else? I asked. Rosa shook her head. That's all. She tapped her pen against the desk. People around here avoid Forest Road 42, especially after dark. Say the wind sounds like whispering. I thanked her and drove back into forest dusk. By 2100, I was parked at the Pisgah trailhead, knees trembling under the weight of another thermos. Harvey, a retired game warden in his 60s, met me with his golden retriever, Scout. "You looking for Dr. Shaw or ghosts, deputy?" he asked. "Both," I said. Harvey lit a lantern and handed me a map. "This old logging trail forks near mile marker 3. The cistern hatch should be just beyond the eastern fork." He scratched Scout behind the ears. "I've been around these woods all my life. Never once poked my nose in that chamber, but I've heard the stories." We set out, the lantern casting flickering halos between trees. Scout padded ahead, nose low. Silence pressed around us, broken by our boots and Scout's occasional whine. The trail forked as Harvey said. We took the eastern path, the ground dropping off steeply on our left. At the bottom, I saw the hatch again, bricks pried loose, a dark cavity yawning. The lantern beam trembled over jagged edges. Harvey grounded his heel in a brick. "They've been here recently." I nodded, heart pounding. We climbed in, Scout hesitant but following. The ladder still clung to damp stone. We descended. My flashlight joined the lantern's glow against the tunnel walls. The smell of must and rot hit me first, then the scrape of gravel beneath Scout's paws. Deeper in, the tunnel slanted down, water dripping in steady drops. I focused on the etchings, repeating circles, intersecting lines, like a map of something I couldn't decipher. Harvey pointed to fresh scratch marks at knee height. Someone kneeling, maybe carving. Blood? No, too dark for fresh. Could have been rust from tools. We pressed on and found the crate from 2 nights ago now overturned. Splinters lay scattered. I knelt and retrieved its lid. Inside, fragments of fabric, olive green material, and a rusted clasp from a camera strap. My pulse raced. Dr. Shaw's camera? Harvey's lantern flickered, beam dancing across the symbols. He cleared his throat. "Deputy, this is more than folklore. Someone's using this place." I rose, pressing my forehead against cool stone. "We need to bring this to the sheriff's office." Harvey nodded. As we turned back, Scout froze. Hackles raised. A low rumble echoed behind us like distant thunder. We followed the sound up the slope until the rumble stopped abruptly. Silence fell again, thicker than before. Back in the open air, I inhaled pine-sweet night. The ladder was slick with fresh condensation. I climbed out first, Harvey close behind. We secured the hatch with rope and left Scout at the mouth, barking up the tunnel before trotting off the trail. At the cruiser, I radioed dispatch. Cistern evidence collected. Returning to station. No answer. The next day, I briefed Sergeant Jacobs on the camera parts and fresh etchings. He frowned. "Deputy Bennett, you've got your curiosity, but this is out of our jurisdiction now. Forestry and state police will handle it." He slid a folder across my desk. "Keep this quiet until they're in place." My badge felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the Polaroid once more. That iron door, ivy-clad and waiting. Somewhere below, walls bore the scars of someone's obsession, and likely the remains of someone who'd wandered too far. Late that afternoon, I got the call. A hiker near the county line found an old camera hung from a tree branch. I felt my chest tighten. I drove 20 minutes to the spot, then hiked in. There it was, a vintage Super 8 rig, its film canister etched with green paint. I loaded it into my evidence bag, careful not to jostle it. Back at the station, I drilled a hole in the canister's cap and extracted the film cartridge. The lab said 24 hours for development. I went home, but sleep eluded me. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Lab. Film ready, come by. I threw on my jacket and raced back. Inside, the lab tech slid me an envelope. I tore it open beneath the cold fluorescent light. 11 stills. The first 9, close-ups of pale orchid petals, dew-heavy leaves. The 10th, a shot of the cistern door, ivy peeled back. Moonlight caught the metal clasp on the hatch. The 11th frame was smudged and overexposed, but the shape of a person loomed at the edge. Lean, tall, shoulders hunched. No face. Just a dark smear where a face should be. My hand trembled. I held the frame up to the lab light. Was that Doctor? Shaw? Or someone else watching us? I left without a word, film in hand. Outside, the night was still. But I knew better. Beyond the trees, something moved. Patient, silent, waiting for me to return. I pulled into an empty lot off County Road 17 at 1:14 a.m., the Polaroid still clutched in my sweaty hand. Streetlights flickered overhead, throwing long shadows across cracked asphalt. The lab prints lay on the passenger seat. 11 frames, 9 orchids, the cistern door, and that blurred figure. I needed clear answers. I slung my jacket over one shoulder and stepped out. Gravel crunching beneath my boots. My flashlight carved a narrow beam through the darkness as I approached the lot's far edge, where an old drainage ditch cut beneath the pavement. Inside, half hidden by weeds, I spotted the latch of a buried service cover, one I'd never noticed before. My pulse quickened. I knelt, brushing mud from rusty metal. The cover budged with a grunt and opened to reveal a narrow shaft, descending into dark nothing. I hesitated at the rim. Below, the air smelled of damp concrete and decay. The echo of dripping water ticked upward. I clipped a small lamp to my belt and lowered myself down, each rung slick with condensation. At the bottom, I knelt on littered fragments. Broken glass, a discarded mitten, a yellowed newspaper clipping tacked with a thumbtack. The headline read, "Local Hunter Vanishes Near Boydsville Woods," dated July 1988. I bagged the clipping and followed a shallow tunnel lined with old masonry. The beam from my lamp wavered over scrawlings in charcoal. A series of tally marks, grouped in fives, dozens of them, leading toward a narrowing bend. My heart thumped as I realized what they counted. Night shifts, missing hours. People maybe never counted. I rounded the bend. My light caught something unexpected. A makeshift shrine of personal items. An empty prescription bottle, a child's shoe, a rusted keychain, and half a dozen photographs pinned to the wall by bent nails. I recognized one, the blurred figure from frame 11. In another, a grinning man in a camo jacket. Jimmy Kincaid, the hunter missing since '90. A third showed Dr. Shaw, bootless, standing before a tree at the edge of night. The walls leaned closer, as if the tunnel itself pressed in. My lamp flickered. I shook it. When the light steadied, I saw fresh footprints muddied into concrete. Bare footprints, small, leading deeper. A low hum began, distant but growing louder. I fumbled for my radio. "Dispatch, Bennett, come in." Only static. I stood, chest tight. The hum had become a low vibration under my boots, like something stirring behind the walls. I shone my light around, scanning for vents, cracks, seams. Then I heard a soft scrape, metal on stone, behind me. I spun. Nothing. The tunnel's end was a dark void, too small to see clearly. The footprints ended there. A voice, ragged, breathless, whispered from the black, "Don't leave me." I froze, every nerve alight. The voice wasn't quite human. It wavered, pitched just off key, as if someone trying to imitate a scream. My skin pricked. I swallowed, forced myself to speak. "I'm here, Doctor. Shaw, show yourself." Silence followed. Then, softly, something brushed past my shoulder, slow, deliberate. My lamp swung, catching a glimpse of movement. A tall shape, spindly, sliding along the brick wall. I fired a warning shot into the air. The echo rattled along the tunnel's length. The shape recoiled, then vanished into the deeper gloom. My blood hammered in my ears. I backpedaled, nearly tripping over a crumpled jacket lying in the dust. It was olive green, torn at the shoulder, Dr. Shaw's jacket from the crate. I snatched it up and turned to climb back, heart pounding in my throat. The tally marks seemed to shift in my mind. Now I saw dozens, hundreds, a lifetime of vanished souls. I reached the cover and heaved myself out, slamming the lid. In the lot, the night felt too quiet. I staggered to my cruiser, hands shaking as I locked the hatch. The radio sputtered to life. "Deputy Bennett, status?" It was dispatch. Relief and shame tangled in my chest. I managed, box closed, evidence secured, will report in. As I drove home, my headlights caught something at the tree line, a figure standing perfectly still, tall and slender, face turned toward the road. I slammed on the brakes. The figure leaped back into the woods without a sound. My heart exploded in my chest. I revved the engine and tore onto the main road, leaving the lot, and whatever haunted its depths, behind. But the tally marks, those muffled whispers and the faces pinned to the tunnel wall, Jimmy, Meredith, the others, followed me home. That morning, I locked my office door and stacked the prints against the wall. I told Jacobs the evidence had been lost in transport. He accepted it. He always did. But deep down, I knew better. The cistern, the drainage shaft, the tally marks, the voices, I'd uncovered only a fraction of what lay buried under these woods. And something in me had changed. I stayed awake nights, staring at empty ceilings, expecting that tall shape to step back into the light. I still drive past that gravel lot on County Road 17, creeping by at midnight. Sometimes I see the service covers ring under the moonlight, and I remember those tally marks counting off names I'll never speak aloud. And I wonder if I'll ever escape their watch. I couldn't sleep the night after the drainage shaft incident. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tally marks and heard the rasping whisper of someone begging, "Don't leave me." By dawn, I was a wreck. Hollowness in my chest and hands trembling so badly, I spilled coffee on my report. I told myself to get back on the streets, clear the head. At 2200 hours, I climbed into the cruiser, swiveling the spotlight across dark farmhouses as I headed west on Route 29 toward the Hollis property. An abandoned dairy barn where a panic alarm had gone off 2 nights earlier with no sign of forced entry. If the county would let me, I'd inspect it again. I parked under a lone street lamp overhead and killed the engine. The air was thick with humidity, sticky against my face as I stepped out. The barn stood 100 yards away, its weathered siding gray in the beam of my flashlight. I had Ramirez on the radio as backup, but he was off duty and out of town, so I was on my own again. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. I swallowed hard and checked my pistol before I walked. A loose rip in the barn's side panel sagged open like an eyelid. I eased inside, boots knocking against planks long soaked in rain. My light played over rusted milking stalls, goats' troughs, and a toppled feeding cart. The broken alarm on the wall still blinked red, tense electronic heartbeat. I found the sensor wire severed halfway down its length. No footprints in the dust, just the copper strands swinging slowly in the draft. I frowned. Someone had been here, cut the line, left nothing else behind. I moved deeper. Something in the far corner caught my eye. Half buried in straw was a length of leather strap, frayed at one end. I bent to pick it up, drained of color, stiff with age. On the strap was stamped a faded seal, the Greenville Botanical Society, circa 1975. My pulse jolted. That was Meredith Shaw's stamp. I radioed dispatch in a muffled whisper. "Dispatch, Bennett, I'm in the Hollis barn. Found botanical strap. Likely connected to Dr. Shaw's pack. No footprints. Requesting K9 unit and extra lighting." No answer. I cursed under my breath. Our radio tower must be on the fritz again. I clipped the strap into an evidence bag and slid it into my coat pocket. Then the barn door creaked so softly I thought it was the wind, but there was no breeze. I aimed my light at the exit. The door hadn't moved. I walked toward it, and my light landed on another object in the straw. A black and white photograph, curled at the edges. I held it close. It was an aerial shot of the drainage shaft cover. Ivy peeled back, taken at dawn. Someone had climbed in with a camera. I rifled through my pocket for the Polaroid of the iron door, the one taped to my desk. The angle matched. Same hatch, same forest floor. Whoever took that photo had been here too. Only they'd left this print behind. I slipped it into another bag. My blood felt thick, heavy. I backed away, turning to leave, and froze. There, scrawled on the barn wall in charcoal, were the same symbols from the cistern tunnel. Concentric circles crossed by jagged lines. But here they were larger, smeared, fresh. My breath caught. I knelt, tracing one shallow groove with a gloved fingertip. Stone had turned to wood here. The lines cut through paint into rotting planks. Someone had carved them within days, maybe hours. I heard a low rumble above me. Not thunder, something closer, almost mechanical. My heart slammed into my ribs. I raised my flashlight and trained it on the loft hatch. The rumble grew louder, more insistent, like heavy breathing, or chains shifting in darkness. I radioed again. "Dispatch, dispatch, respond." Static, then a pop, and a distorted voice. "Stop digging." It cracked through the speaker so distorted I thought my radio had shorted. I dropped to one knee, pistol drawn. "Who's up there?" My voice echoed and returned hollow like a cavern. No answer, only the rumble. I edged toward the ladder leading to the loft. Each rung squeaked under my weight. Sweat stung my eyes. Up top, the beam revealed old hay bales, a rusted pulley, and behind them, footprints in dusty sawdust, bare footprints, mid-calf depth, spaced unevenly. Fresh? I couldn't tell, but they ended at the pulley assembly, where a frayed rope looped around a beam. My jaw clenched. Someone had been hauling something up here. Down below, the rumble ceased, replaced by the steady drip of water. My earpiece crackled. "You know what's beneath you," a voice hissed so close it sent a chill down my spine. I spun. No one. I bolted down the ladder, pistol raising as I hit the floor. The barn door behind me groaned. I aimed, stepped back, and in the beam saw half the door swinging outward on one hinge. No wind. I reached for my radio. Silent. I yelled, "Police!" My voice cracked. The edge of my flashlight caught on a shape darting past the open door. Tall, spindly silhouette slipping into night. My stomach lurching, I chased it out across the yard. Moonlight stained the horizon, faint but enough to see broken fence rails. I called out, "Stop!" But no answer. The shape melted into the tree line. I stood, panting. Only the distant hum of highway traffic responded, My pulse pounded. Every muscle trembled. I stuffed the strap and photo into my pocket and returned to the cruiser. By the time I had the engine running, the barn door had swung shut on its own, the latch clicking home. I moved back 2 cars' length to shine my spotlight on the door. It was still. My radio crackled to life. "Deputy Bennett, status." Relief in the dispatcher's voice. I swallowed and reported, voice shaking. "Barn secure. Possible trespasser long gone. Requesting K9. They promised help was en route. I turned the cruiser toward station, headlights glinting off the dew-slick pavement. I tried to calm my breathing. That strap, the photograph, the symbols. Someone wanted me to follow. Someone wanted me to know. And with every revelation, the woods grew hungrier, deeper, more alive. Back at my desk, I filed the Hollis Barn supplement. Found botanical strap, found photograph, fresh carvings, no suspect. Jacobs flicked through it the next morning. "You're stirring up hell, Bennett," he said softly. "Don't go back in there." I locked eyes with him. "I can't stop now," I whispered. I spent that day gathering the scattered clues, tally marks, shards of photo, the strap, the Polaroid. I stacked them on my desk like a macabre puzzle. Night fell again. I loaded my shotgun in the rack and drove east to the old cemetery road. Another site flagged by Dr. Hayes's emails as a mossy outcrop of rare ferns hidden by headstones. If the orchids thrived there, maybe Dr. Shaw had gone looking. Maybe she left something behind. As I turned onto Cemetery Road, my headlights found headstones leaning in hunches, names eroded. A hollow wind sighed through tree limbs. I clicked on the overhead lights and parked beside a toppled monument. The ground was carpeted in ferns, their fronds draped over grave markers. I grabbed my flashlight. The beam picked out a battered leather notebook wedged under a stone slab. I tugged it free. It was Dr. Shaw's handwriting on the cover. I flipped it open. On the first page, in neat red ink, was a single symbol. A circle bisected by 2 lines. No date, no explanation. Somewhere behind me, something moved. I spun, shotgun ready, but found only more ferns whispering in the dark. My earpiece died again. In my pocket, the notebook throbbed with promise. I folded it into my jacket and climbed back in the cruiser. As I drove away, in my rearview mirror I saw a shadow among the stones, tall, thin, receding into moonless forest. I didn't stop to confirm if it was real. I accelerated down the road, heart rattling in my chest, knowing that every clue I chased led me deeper into something that wasn't just a serial killer or a forest legend. It was bigger, older, darker, and by dawn I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I was in its territory now, where memories slipped into mist, and the watchers kept counting. I drove straight through the night, leaving Cemetery Road and its silent stones behind, but sleep never came. Instead, I felt the weight of Dr. Shaw's notebook in my coat pocket, its single red symbol pulsing like a heartbeat. By first light, I was back at the station with a fresh pot of coffee and 2 maps spread across my desk. One marked with every disappearance in the past 40 years, the other with every sighting of those carved symbols. They overlapped in a rough circle, about 20 miles across, centered on Forest Road 42. I traced the boundary with the shaking finger and realized I'd only scratched the surface. At 900 hours, I called in Sergeant Jacobs. He slid into the seat across from me, eyes narrowed. "Bennett, I've seen you in worse shape after a bender, but this is worse. You're chasing shadows." I slid him Dr. Shaw's notebook. He read the symbol silently, shoulders rising. "I thought you said it was just folklore. It's real," I said quietly. "And whoever's behind it is terribly careful about hiding evidence. But they want us to find these clues. They want us to know. Jacobs closed his eyes, rubbed his temples. You're deep in it now. State police will haul this from us soon. Once they arrive, I need you off this case, understand? I nodded, but I couldn't stop. Even telling himself to let go, Jacobs could see I was already lost. I spent the rest of daylight hours gathering gear, high-powered lanterns, extra batteries, an infrared scope, and thermal imaging camera borrowed from the fire marshal. By 2100 hours, I was back at Forest Road 42, standing beneath the same moss-draped pines where it began. My cruiser's headlights carved twin beams across gravel. I parked beside the ghostly pickup, still where I left it weeks ago, untouched. I'd never registered it, never towed it. Some part of me needed that first image preserved. This time, I brought a small tripod and camera to document every inch. I set the tripod atop the pickup's hood and took a 360-degree shot, then began a painstaking search of the perimeter. The moon was new. No light, no mercy. My thermal imager showed only me and the car, everything else blending into the cold forest. I whistled sharply. Scout, the retriever, bounded out of the tree line, tail wagging, a surprise I'd arranged with Harvey. He emerged behind, his lantern swinging. You sure you want to be here alone? Harvey's grin flickered in the beam. Always liked a good midnight walk. He patted Scout's head. Found anything? I shook my head. Nothing new. There's a hollow here I haven't checked, beneath the old road sign. We moved together to a bent metal marker stuccoed in moss. County line, 0.2 miles. Beneath it, the soil had shifted, as though someone had dug, then refilled. I knelt and removed a handful of dirt. Bits of charred wood and a fragment of photographic film. I bagged them. Harvey shone his lantern on the ground. Looks like an old campfire, maybe a hiker, maybe something else. We were crouched when Scout's hackles rose. The dog stiffened, nose high, then charged past us into darkness. We heard him crash through undergrowth. I flipped on my infrared scope. A shape popped hot red against cool greens. Scout surrounded by something. Dozens of small orange-red heat spots moving slowly. Bears? No, the pattern was too linear. They pressed in a circle, advancing, retreating, never approaching Scout but always keeping him pinned. I clicked to night vision and saw them clearly. Tall silhouettes, head height to small trees, spindly limbs bent at odd angles, bodies half cloaked in ragged cloth. They watched us from just beyond the trees. I yanked off the scope, heart pounding. Harvey, go! I dashed toward the cruiser, adrenaline burning my lungs. Harvey sprinted after me. Scout sparks faded as the figures vanished, swallowed by the night. We flung ourselves into the cruiser and locked doors. I turned the key and floored it, gravel spraying behind. As we sped away, I glimpsed movement in the rearview mirror. A lone silhouette stepping onto the road, arms outstretched, standing rigid until our taillights faded. At the station, I locked evidence in my drawer, then fell into my chair at 200 hours. Nothing mattered but rest. But as I sat, the city lights flickering outside my window, the station's old analog telephone rang. I stared at it, then answered. Static. A voice hissed, cracked, "You're not welcome here." The line went dead. My blood ran ice cold. I slammed down the receiver. Who had my number? How did they know I was back? I drew a fresh sheet of paper and wrote, "They're watching. They know my schedule. They want me off the trail." I underlined it 3 times, then crumpled the note. Sunrise found me bleary-eyed but determined. State police arrived mid-morning and took custody of all evidence. I briefed their lieutenant, who nodded politely, then led his team deeper into the woods than I dared go. I watched them leave, my case dismissed. But as their cruisers formed a convoy, I saw their thermal scans wink out one by one, as they crossed the invisible boundary of that circle of disappearances. They never told me what they found. Back at my desk, Jacobs handed me a transfer order, reassigned to day shift traffic. No more nights, no more mysteries. My heart sank. I packed my gear in silence. My last patrol was the following Thursday in broad daylight, on a straight, empty highway past rolling fields. As I drove, my radio crackled. A 911 call. Panic in the voice. Help, please. Without thinking, I flipped the siren on and raced toward. The call coordinates. It pinged from the old ranger station on Forest Road 42. Daylight slanted between trees. Everything lucid, ordinary. I turned off the siren at the station's fence. The building was abandoned, windows boarded. The radio call ended the moment I arrived. I stepped out and walked around. Beneath a dusty window, I found fresh footprints in mud near the locked door. A single set, size small, bare. They led to the board covering the window, which was pried open. I peered in. Inside was a wall covered with Polaroids. Dr. Shaw's orchid photos, snapshots of the Hollis barn, the drainage shaft, the cistern hatch, the tally marks, the photographs from the shrine, and countless other frames I didn't recognize. Each had coordinates scrawled on the back. Every one shot after my visits, after I left a clue. Someone was cataloging my discoveries. I felt a breath on my neck. I spun, but only wind rustled leaves. I knew I should leave, call it in. But I grabbed a Polaroid from the shrine and pocketed it, the one I hadn't seen before, my own badge, taped to a field notebook under a harsh lamp. On the back, in red ink, a date, tomorrow. And a location, my house. My hand went cold. I left the station without another word. At home that night, I triple-checked every lock. I loaded my pistol by the bed. The Polaroid lay on my kitchen table, Deputy Bennett's badge staring back. I stared at it until dawn. When the sun rose, I drove away in plain clothes, leaving my uniform and badge at the station. I've been on the road ever since, changing names, moving towns, trying to outpace whatever those watchers are counting. I know they mark each clue, each step I take, and I know they're coming for me tomorrow. But I don't know if I'll wait, because they're patient. And in those woods, time doesn't end. Neither do they. I remember the first night I pulled guard duty on County Road 48 as if it were yesterday. Even though it's been months now, and the ghosts still trail my every shift. The moon was a thin sliver behind high clouds, and the cicadas buzzed like distant generators, their hum crawling through the dark pines. I eased the cruiser under the lone street lamp at the village edge, the engine panicking in little ticks as it cooled. My name's Deputy Sam Harper. And just 6 months ago, I swapped Cincinnati's concrete canyons for these endless rural highways. I thought I wanted quiet. I thought I could handle the silence. I was wrong. I settled my boots on the loose gravel beside the cruiser, the stones crunching sharp underfoot, and flipped open my laptop on the passenger seat. A county map blinked on the screen, marked with pinpoints where strangers had vanished. Only 3 at that point. 3 names I'd memorized like bullets in the chamber. Carla Hayes, Thomas Blake, Maria Sanchez. 3 people who stopped their cars for reasons they never explained, and then walked straight into the forest until they were gone. My radio crackled, a burst of static that felt too loud in the emptiness, and I raised my hand before speaking as if anyone else might be listening. "This is Deputy Harper on 48 South routine check," I said into the mic, my voice stiff in the night air. No reply, just the hiss of dead frequencies. I closed the laptop. I knew every mile of that road, but the forest beyond the shoulder might as well have been a different world. I slid back into the cruiser, closing the door with a soft click that echoed. The dashboard lights glowed green over my fatigue-lined face. My eyes flicked to the mirror, catching sight of the dark window that held nothing but more darkness. The heater wheezed when I nudged the dial, sending a warm breath across my neck and reminding me how cold the night could get out here. July didn't promise frost, but the air was wet, seeping under my jacket in damp slashes. I checked the time. 12:17 a.m. The hour when drivers grow careless, phones die, and people begin to believe they can handle one more mile, one more bare turn, one more mile marker past safety. I ran through Carla's file in my head. She'd called from this very stretch, voice shaking. I'd found her sedan with a dead engine, her purse on the seat, phone inside with bars reading empty. She refused my ride back to town, said she could clear her head, needed to walk. So she walked. I tracked her footprints 14 paces into the pines before they vanished. She never returned. I eased the cruiser forward, headlights slicing the night into two bright slats. The road was empty. Black asphalt laid out straight, curving only to dodge a ravine here or skirt a marsh there. A faded yellow line ran down the center, broken where the paint had crumbled away. I watched the edge of the forest press in on both sides, trees shifting like silent sentinels. Under the high beams, the gravel shoulder glittered, then fell into crude grass and ferns that leaned in as though listening. At mile marker 12, I slowed, checking the rear view. No cars, no lights, no signs of Carla. Just that low hiss of insects and the distant goose call of something unseen. My pulse thumped in sync with the windshield wipers I wasn't using. I duked a glance at my lap where the case notes sat open. Victim, Carla Hayes, age 34, teacher, favorite coffee, hazelnut, phone battery at 12%. Vehicle, 2010 sedan, tire pressure normal, engine failure unknown. Footprint length, women's size 7, 14 paces into woods. It read like an accident, but I'd learned to mistrust official conclusions when they clashed with instinct. By the time I finished reading, I was past the spot. I tapped the siren control. Nothing came out. I'd forgotten that light and siren only worked when the cruiser was in drive. I'd been testing the brakes too long earlier, practicing stops on wet pavement. Now I leaned forward, fumbling for the gear shift. Suddenly, headlights appeared in my mirror, a sedan creeping up fast, its beams narrowing like hungry eyes. The radio jolted to life. "Harper, you copy?" Deputy Daniels. I clicked the mic. "Copy, go ahead." "We got a 10:28 at the old Miller barn. I'm still 10 minutes out." I adjusted my route in my head. Old Miller barn, 3 miles east. The call had come in 20 minutes ago. Motion sensor tripped on a broken window. No response to my code. Probable squatters or raccoons. Maybe a broken wildlife camera. Perfectly ordinary. I flicked the switch, blue light blooming against the pines. I accelerated, tires hissing on asphalt, leaving the empty miles behind. In the rear view, the sedan held its distance. I wondered if they'd follow me into the woods like Carla, half trusting the roads. I pushed the cruiser around a bend, banks of tall pines shuttering the sky, and spotted the sagging roof of the Miller barn beyond a fence. The windows were dark smudges on the wood, no lamplight inside. I parked across the road, lights off, engine humming low. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam slicing a path through the undergrowth. My boots sank into wet leaves as I moved silently toward the barn. The fence gate sagged, its rusty hinge squealing when I nudged it, an animal snapping in the brush. I froze, the beam trembling. Nothing moved, No wind, no hoot. Just the steady throb in my ears as I crept closer. I arrived at the barn wall, pressing my back against the rotting boards. Inside, the break in the window was jagged, glass shards still clinging to the frame. I shone my light through the gap. Dust motes floated, caught in the shaft of white. The floor was scattered with hay and broken wood. A shopping cart lay on its side, and farther in a shadow pooled like oil in the corner. I radioed upstairs. Harper to dispatch. I'm investigating a 1028 at Miller Barn. No sign of movement yet. My voice sounded small on the air. Outside, the other cruiser's headlights shimmered between trees, a dull glow on the horizon. My heart hammered as I eased myself inside, all senses tuning to creak and scrape. Then I heard it. A soft thump. Inside, behind the rafters. I turned, trained the beam on the far wall. More thumps, like footsteps across the loft above. My flashlight flickered as I swallowed hard. "Who's there?" I called, my voice firmer than I felt. Silence. The beam drifted upward and caught an old pulley wheel swinging, wood creaking on its rope. A rat? I backed toward the gap, tension coiling in my gut, when the barn door behind me rattled. I spun, light stabbing the open doorway, but saw nothing save for that dark road behind the cruiser in the distance. My skin prickled, and I realized I hadn't heard Daniel's lights arrive. I radioed, heard nothing. Static. Adrenaline slung me forward. I bolted from the barn, stumbling over the fence gate, flashlight hitting the ground with a clatter. In the black field I glimpsed movement. Someone slipping behind the barn. No flashlight, no sound, but the scuff of boots on grass. I cursed under my breath and pursued, calling out, "Police! Show yourself!" The figure dissolved into the woods before I could get close. I reached the tree line and swept my light through thick trunks. Nothing, no footprints, no branch breaks, just night. I stood there, chest heaving, listening as the barn door squeaked closed behind me, over and over until the echoes faded. I got back to the cruiser with hands shaking, scraped and torn by briars. I wiped my forehead on my sleeve, sticky with sweat. The other cruiser sat silent under the lamp. No one inside. I checked my watch, 1:02 a.m. I thought of Carla Hayes walking away from help, of Thomas Blake's footprints ending in moss, of Maria Sanchez's final call dropped in static. I thought of the ledger Clerk Lowe had shown me, decades of disappearances, and I realized then, standing under that lone lamp, that the darkness wasn't empty. It watched, it beckoned, and it wouldn't let go. I got back inside, locked the doors, and sat for a long time in the dark, engine idling, light from my laptop dancing across my face. I opened the case files again and started typing. I had to make sense of it, even if sense was the last thing left in that forest. But every answer twisted into more questions, and by the time dawn's pale light crawled over the treetops, I'd only confirmed one truth. Out here after midnight, alone on County Road 48, you're safer never to stop, and even that might not save you. I woke before sunrise, the cruiser's hood still warm under my hand as I stepped out into the pale gray light. The barn incident had rattled me more than I cared to admit. I sat in the cold air for a long moment, watching mist drift along the road's edge, then flicked on the laptop again. Overnight, the desk lamp in dispatch had caught motion at the northern camera, just before midnight, but the image was grainy, and the shape moved too fast to identify. I tagged the screenshot in the file and closed my eyes against the headache. Back at the station, I found the sheriff leaning over the map table. His face was drawn in the fluorescent bulbs, eyes red. "What did you get at the barn?" he asked without looking up. I told him everything, The break-in call, the shadow behind the loft, the door rattling itself shut, the figure slipping into the woods. He nodded slowly, folding his arms. Same forest, same empty footsteps, same silence. We pored over the ledger from Clerk Lowe, spread it across the table like a puzzle. Each entry was a person who stopped their car, walked off, and vanished. Date, name, age, car make, outcome. Nothing about witnesses seeing someone else. Nothing at all. 12 cases since '68, I said. No one caught sight of another person. The sheriff tapped a pencil on the file. And nothing in the ME reports to suggest they plan to walk off. His voice was flat as a grave marker. I took a breath and tried to push the dread aside. What if it's someone setting the engine to die? A broken spark plug, a frayed wire, anything to force them out. He shook his head. We've tested cars left here. No sabotage. No signs of remote jamming. And even if they broke down, why walk into the thicket at midnight instead of staying with the car? I had no answer. We decided to replot the disappearances on a fresh map. The sheriff drew a 5-mile arc around the latest site. Pins clustered like wounds. I traced a line between them and realized the pattern made a rough spiral, not a straight line. I pointed. Look. If someone wanted to control where they ended up, they could park at one pin, lure them in, then move to the next. He stared at the map, brow furrowed. Psychological trap, draw them in deeper each time. A chill ran down my spine. That afternoon, we held a special meeting with the county board. I presented our findings: empty vehicles, voluntary departures, no physical evidence beyond the victim's own prints. I asked for more cameras, heat sensors, motion detectors along the shoulder. The board balked at the expense. Councilman Graves said people wouldn't drive after dark anyway. Councilwoman Finch suggested a volunteer neighborhood watch. I clenched my fists under the table and kept my face still. We left with a promise of better signage and an extra patrol once a week. I drove home under a bruised sky. My daughter's bed was empty. She was spending the week with her mother. I stood in the hallway too tired even to close the door. My mind kept replaying the way the door had clacked shut behind me in the barn, as if someone coaxed it from the inside. I lay on the couch and fell into a restless half-sleep, haunted by footprints that vanished and voices that never spoke. That night, I was back on County Road 48 before midnight. My lights scanned the road every mile, the radio silent. My reflection in the side mirror looked older, eyes sunken, jaw tight. I thought about giving up, handing the file to someone else, writing inconclusive across the top. But then I remembered Carla, Thomas, Maria, 3 strangers who trusted this road and disappeared. I refused to let their stories end in bureaucratic dust. At 12:45, the overhead scanner pinged. An abandoned truck at mile marker 13. I flipped on the overhead lights and rolled forward. Sure enough, a flatbed work truck sat on the shoulder. Engine off, blinkers on, no one in sight. I parked behind it and stepped out into the humid night. My boots sank in dew-soaked gravel. Wind chimes tinkled somewhere ahead, someone's farmhouse maybe. I clicked on my flashlight and swept the tree line. Nothing but thick darkness. I checked the truck. Keys in the ignition, paperwork strewn on the dash. Local construction crew. Estimated arrival at 9 p.m. Call in at 11:30, reporting no fuel gauge. Crew sent him back alone to fill the tank. Then silence. Name on the clipboard: Eric Lawson, age 42. Married, 2 kids. Phone was on the passenger seat, battery at 7%. No calls after that. I radioed dispatch. Harper to dispatch. I've got an abandoned vehicle at marker 13. No sign of driver. Beginning search. I plunged into the woods with the beam cutting through the trees. My heart beat loud in the still air, each breath ragged. I retreated 5 paces off the road and found his footprints in the mud. Size 10 boots, a hurried pace. They led south toward a dense stand of birch. I followed, stumbling over roots. The forest smelled of wet earth and rot. I called out, voice bouncing off trunks. "Eric, this is the sheriff's department." Silence. Only my beam and the rustle of leaves answered. I scanned left and right, swirling in circles, but the footprints vanished where the grove thickened. I crouched, shining light through the brush. No sign of foot traffic, nothing broken. It was as if he'd stepped off the earth itself. I backed out and met my breath in clouds. My radio crackled. "Harper?" It was Daniels. "Your light's on, but you're not answering." I told him to join me at the truck. He arrived 10 minutes later, breathless, torch in hand. We split up, moving parallel, calling Eric's name. The forest swallowed our calls. After an hour, we gave up. No body, no footprints forward, no trace. We found Eric's wallet in the passenger footwell, door still ajar, his keys on the floor mat. "Same as the others," Daniels muttered. He rubbed his neck and lit a cigarette. I didn't judge him. I wanted one too, but I kept my hands busy. We towed the truck and drove back under the open sky. The road was a ribbon of black, stretching straight into nothing. The radio came alive with routine traffic, but I heard only silence. I couldn't shake the feeling of watching eyes between the trees. I dropped Daniels at the station and went home, exhausted. I lie awake, listening to cars pass on Main Street, thinking of the forest's quiet promise. At 3 a.m., I dreamt I was driving that road. The dashboard read 0 miles per hour, 0 gas, 0 hope. The trees leaned in, whispering my name. I woke, heart pounding, to the hum of my ceiling fan. Morning found me in my office, staring at the map cluttered with 4 pins. I traced the spiral again, this latest one slightly offset. Someone, or something, was orchestrating these disappearances. But every time I got close, the trail turned cold. No witness, no evidence, not even a clue. That night, I drove out one last time. Lights off, engine idling. I parked at marker 12, where Carla's footprints had ended. The wind carried a single crow's call. I killed the engine. The silence pressed in, heavier than any crowd I'd ever faced in Cincinnati. I opened the passenger door and stepped out, inching toward the tree line, flashlight off. I wanted to feel what Carla felt, a step into the unknown. My heart thudded as the underbrush brushed my leg. I paused, breathing slow. Then I heard it. A faint footstep behind me on the gravel shoulder. I whipped around, heart in my throat, shining the beam. Nothing. But I felt it, a presence brushing past, gone before I saw it. I ran back to the cruiser and slammed the door, locking it. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I drove away without looking back. The road vanished behind me, empty and unchanged. But I knew it would call again, offering dark comfort to anyone lonely enough to answer. I drove home that morning with my mind still tangled in midnight shadows. The world at sunrise felt foreign. Birds chattered like they knew secrets I'd lost, and neighbors greeted me cheerfully as I crept past the grocery on my way to the station. I forced myself to eat a granola bar and gulp coffee so bitter it burned, trying to scrub the night from my thoughts. But nothing washed away the feeling that the forest had reached past the tree line and left its chill in my bones. At my desk, I stared at the map again. 5 pins now marked County Road 48. Carla, Thomas, Maria, Eric, and the locksmith whose name I couldn't even remember without opening his file. I thumbed through the stack, each case thicker with unanswered questions than the one before. Case files filled with sterile bureaucratic language, voluntary walk-off, accidental exposure, no signs of foul play. I almost laughed, but it came out as a dry cough. I checked the call logs, no new reports. The forest had gone silent, save for the soft hum of my desk fan. I realized I hadn't slept properly in days. Dark rings cradled my eyes, and my neck ached from tensing under unknown weight. I rubbed at my temples and decided to get out of the office. I grabbed the cruiser keys, told dispatch I was stepping out for a road inspection, and headed back toward Marker 12. The road was empty that afternoon, golden sun slanting through pine needles. It looked peaceful, almost pastoral, but I knew better. I parked under the same weak street lamp and climbed out. Nothing about daylight changed what happened here. I closed my eyes and listened. Distant tractors, a crow's lonely caw, wind sifting through branches. I walked 15 paces into the trees where Carla's footprints had vanished. The ground felt solid under my boots, no moss, no mud, nothing soft to swallow prints. I took out a notepad and scribbled, "At Marker 12, no physical anomaly, forest floor undisturbed." I snapped a photo of the spot and left, hurrying back to air-conditioned normalcy. Back at the station, Sheriff Monroe met me in the hallway. He was older, retired Navy, shoulders like river boulders, and he looked at me with worry. "You're spending too much time out there," he said quietly. "You can't chase ghosts forever." I swallowed, meeting his gaze. "I'm not chasing ghosts. I'm tracking patterns." He sighed and laid a hand on my shoulder. "Be careful, these woods aren't forgiving." I nodded, but part of me bristled. That night I couldn't help myself. I parked at Marker 13, the site of Eric's disappearance, and waited. I kept the engine on this time, radio tuned to my favorite old country station, the one that reminded me of home. 10 minutes passed, 20. My toes tapped on the carpet. I shredded a paper cup in my fist. I glanced at the forest edge, twitching with shadow. I thought I saw movement, a flicker of white between two trees. I flicked on the spotlight and swung it across the tree line. Nothing. Just sun-flecked trunks. Frustrated, I shut the light again. I was about to leave when I heard it. A single, distant bark. A dog? Unlikely this late and deep into the pines. I listened. Another bark, twice as far away, like an echo. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, hear possible animal at Marker 13. Can you ping the volunteer search crew?" No response. I cursed under my breath, slamming the mic. I grabbed my flashlight again and climbed over the fence toward the woods. My pace was quick, heart bumping. My flashlight beam trembled in my grip. I followed a winding deer trail, counting my steps until I reached a small clearing. The undergrowth here lay trampled in patterns, circular shapes, as if someone had paced back and forth. I knelt and pressed my gloved palm into the grass. Damp, cool, recent. I rose and walked its edges, scanning for footprints. None but my own. I shone the light toward a fallen log. Scratch marks. Long. Straighter than a branch scratch, like claws scraping bark. I took pictures, my throat constricting. Nothing about the official files mentioned any animal evidence. A rustle behind me made me spin. Flashlight beam jagged through mossy trunks. 2 red dots glowed for a moment. Eyes? A fox? Deer? Then they vanished. I stepped backward, heart pounding, and realized I'd walked too far. The forest here was thick. Branches snagged my jacket. Low limbs whipped my face. I turned toward the road. The moon was rising, pale silver above the treetops, too high for a summer night. I flicked on the spotlight and peered through the branches. nothing. I made my way back to the fence, stumbling on roots until I crossed over and landed in the gravel. I stood there, breathing hard, and heard a soft rustle behind me. I clicked my boots onto the asphalt shoulder and turned. Flashlight beam found a small shape at the edge of the forest. At first, I thought it was a raccoon, but it stood on two legs. A man-sized silhouette crouched low, blending into the undergrowth. I flipped the spotlight on full, light stabbing the night. The shape dropped to all fours and darted sideways with a speed no human could match. It vanished into the darkness before I could lift my gun. I sprinted to the cruiser, breath tearing at my lungs, threw the door open and locked it behind me. Engine roaring, I spun the car around and peeled away, tires screeching on gravel, leaving the fence and the figure in the night behind. As I sped back to town, the shape flickered in my peripheral vision, just a glimpse of movement between the trees. I slammed on the brakes but saw nothing in the high beams, only the road stretching empty, beckoning. The next morning, I replayed my dashcam footage. There was no spotlight moment, no figure, just grain and shadow. I adjusted contrast, brightness, ran enhancement filters. Still nothing. The scratch marks on the log were gone. Disturbed soil had settled back. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, then shut the laptop. There was no evidence. It never left evidence. The sheriff's board meeting was scheduled for 2 days later. I prepared my presentation, determined to press for motion sensors in the thickets and license plate readers at both ends of the 5-mile stretch. At home, I barely ate dinner, toast and cold coffee, then sat at my desk drafting testimony. My pen scrawled frantic lines. We cannot rely on bodies and prints when the forest itself erases everything. We need technology. My daughter called, her voice bright. I forced a smile. I'll pick you up Friday, Pumpkin. She laughed. I missed her already. On the day of the meeting, I stood before the county board, hearts of oak behind their desks. I laid out the pattern, 6 disappearances, 6 empty scenes, 6 funerals. I showed them log files, partial photos, my own shaky video stills. Graves tapped his pen. Finch folded her arms. When I finished, silence yawned between us. Councilwoman Finch spoke. Deputy Harper, have you considered that perhaps the victims had mental health crises, walking away intentionally, perhaps suicidal? A murmur followed. The sheriff leaned forward. We've ruled out suicide. They drove here themselves. I added, no suicide note, no indication. They had lives, jobs, families. None displayed depression. The board exchanged glances, no green lights. I left the chamber with nothing but polite nods. On the courthouse steps, the midday sun felt harsh. I climbed into my cruiser, face wet with sweat or tears. I couldn't tell. I tapped the steering wheel, then drove out to marker 12 again. Afternoon light was sharp. It stripped the forest of menace. But I knew the menace remained. I got out and walked 20 paces with my flashlight off, closing my eyes against glare. The forest breathed around me. I felt it pressing in, patient and waiting. I returned to the cruiser and drove back. My radio crackled with routine dispatch. A barking dog complaint in Cedar Springs, a backyard fence knocked loose. I listened without responding, mind still in the pines. That evening, I didn't sleep. I drank coffee until my teeth rattled and stared at the ceiling as shadows winked and shifted. I tried to will my heart calm, but it clattered like a trap snapping. When night came again, I climbed into the cruiser and drove out with the heater on full blast. I turned off the lights at marker 14, where the pattern said the next disappearance should happen. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat in total blackness. The radio was off. My flashlight lay on the passenger seat off too. I wanted to feel the road alone, to sense if anything moved without my light scouring the trees. Time passed. My eyes adjusted until I could see a faint silver line where asphalt met gravel. Above, the sky flickered with stars I seldom noticed before. I thought about Carla, Thomas, Maria, Eric, the locksmith whose name I still couldn't recall, and the mill worker Jack Harmon. I wondered if they'd seen this same sky on the night they walked away. Then I heard it. A heartbeat, not mine. A slow, deliberate thud coming from 3 feet behind me. I tasted copper in my mouth. My own heartbeat galloped. I reached for the torch, fingers brushing metal. Only the cold dash. I swung my head toward the door. The shape stood there as clear as day, a man's silhouette outlined against the road's silver strip. He didn't blink. He tilted his head. Then he leaned forward, as if inviting me to step out. I didn't move. My skull felt hollow. I swallowed. The shape raised an arm and pointed past me, toward the trees, wordless, patient. I realized with a sick clarity, this was the same silent summons that had drawn each victim, a summons I could never refuse. I edged the seat back, pulled my service pistol from the console, and aimed at the driver's door. The figure didn't flinch. It remained perfectly still. I called out, voice shaking, "Who are you? What do you want?" No reply, just the shifting stars above and that heartbeat, or maybe it was my own echoing in my ears. My finger tightened on the trigger, but I couldn't fire. Part of me wanted to answer him, to step into that silent call, to know the truth waiting beyond the tree line. Another part screamed at me to floor the gas, to leave the road behind and never look back. I did neither. I sat frozen, the night thick around me, my life teetering on the edge of a whispered invitation into the dark. The figure watched, waiting, as I chose between running and walking into the forest. And in that terrible moment I understood that the road didn't just kill or make people vanish, it claimed something more precious, the will to stay. I closed my eyes against the black. When I opened them again, the shape had stepped closer, so close that I could see its breath, a faint mist in the cold night air. Time slowed. The forest held its breath. And then, behind me, the cruiser lights blinked on, headlights bright enough to sear the darkness. A second cruiser rolled into view, Diane Morales at the wheel. She stumbled out, flashlight in hand, eyes wide. "Deputy Harper?" she called. "Are you okay?" The shape looked at her, vanished, and left only emptiness behind. I lowered the pistol, hands shaking, and realized that even when help came, the road still won. I wanted to chase the figure, to follow him into the rafters of trees, but I watched the gravel where he'd stood. Nothing stirred, no footprints. The forest refused to give him back. I stood there until the backup light's glow faded the moment he'd existed. Then I climbed into the cruiser, locked the door, and sat in the hum of 2 engines. City lights felt safer than this. Diane leveled her light back and forth as we drove toward town. I climbed into the cruiser just past dusk, the sky bruised purple and the air tasting of rain yet to fall. My hands trembled as I closed the door, the echo of that silhouette's breath still ringing in my ears. Deputy Morales was waiting inside, her flashlight stowed on the console and her eyes heavy with questions she hadn't asked. I killed the engine and dialed dispatch, not wanting to break the fragile silence. "Unit 12, I'm at marker 14. No activity reported yet," I said quietly. The dispatcher's voice floated back, routine, detached. I ended the call and leaned back, pressing my head against the headrest. My uniform felt damp with sweat and dread. Somewhere beyond the tree line, the forest watched, patient and immense. Morales cleared her throat. "You okay?" she asked. I stared at the windshield. The road ahead, a thin ribbon fading into darkness. "As good as you can be," I replied. She nodded, fished a small thermos from her bag, and offered it to me. I took a sip of bitter coffee, my throat tight. She sat in silence, and I realized how rare that was. 2 officers sharing a shift without chatter, both haunted by the same emptiness. 15 minutes passed. No sirens, no stray headlights, no movement beyond the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, through the windshield, I caught sight of them. Headlights, distant and dim, creeping toward us like a slow predator. I flipped on the overhead lights. The beams etched the road in hard white, cutting through shadows. The approaching vehicle hesitated at marker 14, then rolled onto the shoulder, engine ticking down. Morales reached for the door, radio in hand. "Dispatch, we've got an unknown vehicle at 14, plate unreadable, heading back to check," she said. I glanced at her, saw the edge of fear in her eyes. She stepped out, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. I watched her recede into the dark until her beam hit the stranger's truck, a squat pickup half buried in shadow. My pulse raced. I followed her out, boots on gravel, the metal scent of rain creeping in the night air. The pickup's driver door hung open, no one inside. Morales swept the beam across the seat, a hard hat on the floorboard, a torn map poking from the glove compartment. We called out together, "Hello? Anyone here?" Only our voices answered, carried off by the pines. We checked the map. It was hand-drawn, not a standard county chart. A spiral marked around this stretch of road, arrows pointing deeper into the woods. Morales frowned. "What the hell is this?" She rifled through the pockets in her jacket and found a crumpled photograph. A woman's smiling face, pinned beneath the map. Carla Hayes, I realized with a jolt. My throat tightened. I knelt, picked up the photo, and snapped a picture with my phone. Morales shone her beam at the ground around the truck. Fresh footprints, size 9 boots leading toward the trees. I traced them with my flashlight, the beam dancing over damp earth and scattered pine needles. They veered south, straight into the dark. I radioed for backup. 2 cruisers, a K9, full search. I took a deep breath and stepped off the shoulder, flashlight in hand. The forest swallowed us almost at once. The underbrush clawed at my legs as we pushed forward. Morales stayed close, her light carving a tunnel in the black. Every crack of wood and snap of twig put us on edge. After 50 yards, the footsteps ended at a clearing ringed by birch and oak. The ground here was trampled, leaves crushed under invisible feet. I swept my beam across in a wide arc. The map's spiral was etched into the grass. Scorched lines sprayed with white paint, faint but deliberate. My skin crawled. Whoever made these wanted us to follow a path, leading us deeper. Morales placed her hand on my shoulder. "Deputy, we should wait for K9, she whispered. I shook my head, number. "They're counting on us waiting." My partner nodded reluctantly, and following my lead, we stepped onto the painted spiral. The trees closed in above us, branches tangling like fingers. For the next quarter-mile, we followed the spiral's curve, hearts pounding as we advanced ever inward. The map's arrows lined up with the path we trod, a corridor of broken limbs and pressed-down ferns. Every turn angled us southwest, though the road lay due east. I realized with dread that we would circle back underneath the trees. Lost. Morales's flashlight caught something ahead, a flashlight lying on the ground. Its beam still on, casting a single column of light upward. We approached, heartbeats hollow in our ears. The torch lay beside a man's hat, baseball cap with a restaurant logo. I recognized it. Thomas Blake's cap, the exchange student. Morales knelt to pick it up. "They've brought him here," she said, voice trembling. I crouched and scanned the ground. Fresh footprints led off the spiral, heading straight for a dense thicket. I pointed. "He must have broken the pattern." Morales nodded, raising her radio. "Dispatch, we've got possible sighting of Blake, moving northward." The radio crackled, but no answer came. We set off after the footprints, moving fast. The clear path ended suddenly in brambles. I braced my flashlight on a thick root and shoved aside branches. The thicket yielded to an open glade. Moonlight spilled through a break in the canopy, illuminating a figure hunched near a large stone. It was Blake, leaning forward, hands on knees, gasping as if he'd run miles. His eyes were wide, wild. He looked at us with fear, relief, confusion. "Deputy Harper, you came," he stammered. I holstered my gun and moved closer. "What happened? Why did you walk into the woods?" He swallowed hard. "It called me. I heard it." He pressed his ear to the ground, then straightened. "It's singing." I didn't understand until a low hum rippled through the clearing. A melody, like distant voices. Too soft to be human, but too sad to be anything else. The trees around us began to sway, though no wind blew. Morales grabbed Blake's arm. "Let's go," she urged. We led him back along his footprints, past the painted spiral, retracing our steps. The hum trailed behind us, growing fainter until it vanished. When we emerged into the road's glow, the cruiser lights flashed red and blue. Backup had arrived. The K-9 danced at the line between forest and shoulder. Blake collapsed into the back seat, shivering. Morales shut the doors, and I checked the perimeter. The forest stood still as a grave. No sign of painted lines or spiral, just grass and trees, as if the clearing never existed. Back at the station, Blake refused to speak further, only drew a trembling spiral in his notebook and stared at it. Even when we pressed him, he whispered, "It's hungry." Later, as I filed reports, I printed the map and Blake's spiral, then taped them side by side on my office wall. I stared until my eyes blurred, seeing threads connecting every disappearance. Map lines, painted spirals, lost footprints. A trap laid over decades. Exhausted, I shut off the desk lamp and left for home. The map panels glowed through my windshield as I drove past the station, and I felt a tug, like the road itself reached out. I forced my foot on the pedal and sped away, swearing never to look back. But when I reached marker 13, I saw it again, a flash of white paint on the shoulder, a crisp arrow pointing into the forest, and beneath it, in letters too small to read from the road, "Come home." I slammed on the brakes and stared, heart pounding. The world tilted. I reached for my radio, then realized dispatch was silent. No answers, no help. I shut the engine off and sat in the dark, breathing hard. The forest waited beyond my door, silent but insistent. I unholstered my pistol and placed it on the passenger seat. I grabbed the flashlight. I stepped from the cruiser onto the gravel shoulder, the flashlight's beam cutting a tunnel into the darkness. The beige gravel crunched beneath my boots as I followed the arrow painted on the road. The message, "Come home," glowed white against the blacktop. My heart hammered, but my training held me back from retreat. This was where I'd draw the line between fear and duty. The beam swept across the forest edge, tall pines whose needles whispered secrets in the slight breeze. Ahead, the painted arrow pointed into a faint path where grass and ferns bent away, forming a narrow corridor. I paused at the threshold, inhaling the cool scent of pine and damp earth. The silence was absolute save for my breath, rattling like a machine. I checked my radio, static, no sign of Morales or dispatch. Everyone back at the station would assume I'd stayed with Blake. No one watched this stretch anymore. I glanced back. My cruiser sat alone under the weak glow of the overhead lamp, its blue and red lights off. I clicked the flashlight off and let my eyes adjust. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, revealing that the arrow's path curved gently left, then right, swinging deeper. Each step I took felt deliberate, as though the road itself guided my footfalls. The gravel turned to soft loam, and my boots sank a little with each pace. I held the flashlight low, its narrow beam dancing between ferns. The air cooled as I progressed. My uniform clung to me with damp sweat, but the chill made me shiver. 15 paces in, I found a weathered matching arrow scratched into the bark of the first pine. A mirror of the one on the road. Beneath it, deep gouges in the wood. I ran my gloved fingertips over them. They were fresh. I jerked my head around. The forest seemed unchanged, as if nothing had marked the trees. I flicked the beam upward. No carved arrows on neighboring trunks. Someone had laid this trail for me alone. I continued, every nerve alive. Behind me, the path swallowed the light. Ahead, a dim glow appeared beyond a rise. A shaft of pale radiance pulsing like a heartbeat. I climbed the gentle slope and found myself at the center of a clearing ringed with birch. Moonlight spilled through gaps, casting long silver fingers across the grass. In the center stood a crude wooden shrine, 4 vertical logs driven into the earth, tops joined by crossbeams. Ropes and strips of cloth fluttered from the beams, each strip etched with names: Carla Hayes, Thomas Blake, Maria Sanchez, Eric Lawson, Jack Harmon. And one more, my name, Sam Harper. My breath caught as I stepped closer. Beneath the shrine lay a single wooden chair, empty, positioned to face out toward the forest. I circled it, shining my light on rough carvings along its back. Footprints. Footprints like mine, deep impressions, run through with thin white paint. I knelt and inspected a footprint. The toes and arch aligned exactly with the boots I wore. Yet there was no other disturbance in the clearing, no additional prints leading away. It was as if the chair and shrine had drawn me into a vacuum where only I existed. The hush pressed in, and I heard it again. A low hum, far softer than voices, yet shaping itself into a melody of longing. It seemed to echo from the trees, calling my name. I stood, every hair on my neck rising. The arrows on the logs pointed outward now, directing away from the shrine, into the darkness beyond. I tested my pistol's safety. It clicked free in my fist. I took a measured step toward the nearest arrow-carved log. "Who's here?" I called, voice steady but low. The hum intensified, rising and falling like breathing. Moonlight glinted on the worn rope ends, making them look alive. Then I saw her, Carla Hayes, stepping from the tree line beyond the shrine. Her face was pale and drawn, eyes hollow yet glittering with unshed tears. She wore her teaching blouse, torn at the hem, and her hair hung limp around her shoulders. Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Deputy Harper," she said in a soft whisper that carried across the grass. "You came home." My hand shook on the pistol grip. "Carla, you're dead," my voice cracked. You died out here." She tilted her head as if listening, and the hum shifted into discordant murmurs. The voices of all those lost blended as one. "You didn't stay," she intoned, voice echoing unnaturally. "You walked away." She lifted a hand to the empty chair, and the roped cloth strips snapped in a breeze I couldn't feel. "Sit, join us." I raised the pistol toward her, mind screaming. "Fall back," I shouted. Carla took a step closer, mossy grass whispering under her feet, though no footprints showed on the ground. Behind me, the forest shook. My pulse thundered, I turned, expecting figures emerging, but saw only shadows between trees. The arrows beneath the logs pointed inward now, angling toward the shrine, guiding something toward me. I backed away, stumbling, glancing at the clearing's edge. Carla extended her hand. "It's time, Sam." The hum swelled into a chorus of sighs. I squeezed the trigger, but the shot sounded muted, a single echo swallowed by darkness. My ears rang as the barrel clattered on the shrine's beam. Carla's form flickered, like a candle sputtering, then solidified. Her eyes locked on mine, full of grief. "You chose," she whispered. I dropped the pistol and swung around, sprinting back up the slope. The arrows on the trees blurred as I passed. The forest seemed to stretch, elongating the path. Gravel hissed beneath my boots when I reached the road. I didn't look back as I vaulted into the cruiser and slammed the door. Engine roared. I spun tires on the gravel until the cabin rocked. Through the windshield, the clearing lay empty. No shrine, no chair, no carved logs, just a shadowed stand of birch beneath the moon. I peeled away, heart hammering, and didn't stop until the county line sign slipped past in my mirror. At home, I collapsed on the floor of my study, eyes fixed on the door. The radio crackled. Routine traffic, someone's late-night barking complaint. I glanced at the pistol lying on the desk, unloaded, its shot lost. I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate, though my daughter's at her mother's and Morales is off shift. I turned slowly. In the doorway stood a figure, backlit by the hallway light. Blank face, shapeless form. I reached deep for calm, rotating my grip on the pistol even as my breath rattled. I whispered. I told myself I'd never look back. The figure took a step forward. The radio flicked off in a static pop. Then the door shut itself. I fired once into the dark. No body, no breath, no wound. Only the echo of the shot and the soft drip of something wet. I stand now beside the empty doorway, pistol smoking in my hand, listening. The hallway is silent. The doll in my daughter's room stares blankly, as if waiting. And I know the road never ends. It follows you home.